The coffin moved. A vampire bird crawled out from inside. Witcher wielded weapons and engaged in a battle with the vampire bird. This is how the story of the first season of the sci-fi epic The Witcher begins. This girl was sold by her stepfather to someone else for 4 marks. In the local area, a pig could be sold for 10 marks. And this was Mina's childhood experience. The reason for all of this is that Mina was born into a humble background. Her father was an elf, while her mother was a human. Mina had congenital asymmetry in her cheekbones, causing one side of her face to protrude outward. She also suffered from rickets, which prevented her from working in the fields. Therefore, in the eyes of her stepfather, she was considered worthless, like a rogue consuming the family's resources. Her stepfather did not allow Mina to eat at the table, so she slept in the pigsty and ate with the pigs. One day, a boy from the same village picked a bunch of wildflowers, intending to express his love to another girl. The girl threw the wildflowers on the ground, and happily prepared to kiss the boy. However, at that moment, they realized that the wildflowers they had thrown on the ground had disappeared. In the midst of confusion, Mina in the pigsty picked up the wildflowers, intending to return them to them, but Mina's horrifying appearance, behavior, and actions made the two believe she had sinister motives, so they resorted to physical confrontation with Mina. Mina could no longer bear it, and in her scream, she released a powerful energy that transported her to a strange place. It was eerie and terrifying here, as it turned out to be an underground chamber, where skulls were constructed into an arena. Marble columns endured countless years, yet their grandeur and magnificence were still evident. While Mina was feeling bewildered, she noticed a boy at the edge of the platform, taking notes on something. At this moment, the boy who sensed someone was quite surprised. The boy assumed Mina was a sorceress who came here. He asked Mina if she was a virgin. Upon hearing the question, Mina raised her hand and gave the boy a slap on the face. The boy also realized his audacity. They engaged in conversation. The boy realized that Mina wasn't knowledgeable about magic, but she could directly open portals, so he marveled at Mina's astonishing talent. Afterward, the boy recited an incantation and opened the portal once again. Just when Mina thought she would return to her original world, the boy said to her. He introduced himself as Istrid, an apprentice sorcerer. The boy instructed Mina that a woman would come to find her soon, and he hoped Mina would be mentally prepared for it. After saying that, he sent Mina back to her previous world. Perhaps it was the first time she was treated patiently by someone. Mina immediately developed a favorable impression of the boy. Not long after, a woman arrived at Mina's doorstep. The woman claimed to be a witch. After meeting Mina's father, Mina was sold to the witch by her stepfather for 4 marks. Mina's mother, standing by the door, didn't dare to stop her stepfather, as in that era, women in ordinary households didn't have the power to make decisions. Once brought back by the witch, before she could react, she was thrown into an underground chamber. She forcefully pounded on the wooden door of the underground chamber. Of course, no one would pay attention to an ugly creature worth 4 marks. Seeing her own ugliness in the mirror, Mina shattered the mirror. Then she picked up the shards, intending to end her own life. The next day, Mina was awakened by a shout. She opened her eyes and looked. It was the witch who had brought her there. The witch claimed to be the headmistress of a magic academy. She saved her upon discovering her suicidal thoughts. But Mina didn't show any gratitude, and the headmistress didn't waste time on pleasantries. She dragged Mina to a classroom, where desks were arranged. All the girls here were like her, possessing the talent for learning magic. And in the final graduation ceremony, the most outstanding performers would become the next generation of sorceress. The headmistress told them that they possessed not ordinary magic, but chaotic magic. Their abilities were slowly awakening, and they would have no other choice but to learn to control and balance this power, as losing control of this power would lead to irreparable damage. One of the girls wanted to test the power of magic. She recited an incantation, and the stones on the desk flew up. Just when she joyfully proclaimed her success, someone next to her started shouting, and a terrifying scene unfolded. The girl's hand instantly aged and decayed, and she was frightened and started crying. The headmistress immediately used an incantation to restore the girl's hand to normal, and told everyone that chaotic magic doesn't create something out of nothing. To wield this powerful magic, one must pay a certain price, otherwise they will suffer the backlash themselves. Afterward, The headmistress Witcher traded how to balance this power. The bouquet in her left hand withered instantly, while the stones on her right side soared into the air. Other students saw this and began to imitate. Before long, everyone had mastered this simple technique. No matter how hard Mina tried, the stones remained unmoved. Time passed quickly. While others were learning more magical techniques, Mina couldn't progress as rapidly. She was as slow as a turtle. One day, Mina went to the underground chamber to meet the boy again. She poured out her feelings to the boy. In fact, Mina had developed admiration and affection for the boy. She came on this journey to seek comfort from the boy. For her, only the boy would be patient with her. However, her humble background and ugly appearance made her hesitate to express her love to the boy. Several more days passed. On a stormy night, the students were taken to the tower in the middle of the sea, known as Seagull Tower. It was a compulsory course for all students. Whether they could catch lightning was the criteria everyone had to meet. The test began. A brave girl took the test for the first time and was unexpectedly struck unconscious by lightning. Shortly after, someone started being able to catch lightning. As more and more people were able to catch it, it was Mina's turn to go up. Mina faced the sky, extended the collection bottle in her hand. A dazzling bolt of lightning directly entered her body, reflecting on her life. Mina shouted loudly, raised her fingertips. The lightning within her body transformed into a ball of light and flew forward, almost accidentally injuring others. Although it was a foolish and impulsive act, it also made the headmistress realize that Mina possessed exceptional potential and talent. In the evening, Mina decided to visit the underground chamber again. When Istrid comforted Mina, he taught Mina an incantation. What surprised both of them was, Mina instantly grasped it and effortlessly summoned a portal. Facing the sincere Istrid, Mina expressed her feelings, conveying her admiration for the boy. The two of them started kissing, unbeknownst to her. This would bring trouble upon herself. From then on, the love between Mina and Istrid gave Mina confidence, so she approached the headmistress with the intention of becoming a sorceress, because if her wish was fulfilled, she could work together with Istrid. However, on this night, while returning to her room, she stumbled upon something unexpected. Inside a cave, the headmistress had transformed several students into eels. Mina was shocked and panicked. She was stopped by the headmistress. The headmistress ordered her to push the eels into the dark river in order to achieve her goals. Mina had no choice but to obey. Afterward, the headmistress explained the reason to Mina. It turned out, these students with low aptitude had no hope of becoming sorceress. They were transformed into these creatures to maximize their value. They would join the other fish in the river, contributing to the balance of chaotic energy. In the academy, their sacrifice has also maintained this balance for the promotion of other students. As a result, time passed quickly. The academy was nearing its graduation ceremony. Before that, there would be a challenging graduation exam. Only by passing the exam could one have the opportunity to become a sorceress and be chosen by the kings of various nations to contribute to the governance of their countries. Mina made rapid progress later on and successfully passed the exam. Initially, the headmistress intended to send her back to her hometown, Aden, but at the Wizard Council, the male headmaster of the Magic Academy revealed Mina's elven heritage, thus exposed Mina's humble background. In this way, Mina was assigned to a small kingdom, while Hela was assigned to Aden. Mina went to the headmistress's office, wanting to ask clearly, but the headmistress claimed not to know how Mina's elven lineage had been discovered. At that moment, Mina realized her beloved boy might have betrayed her. Istrid belonged to the male branch of the Magic Academy, and the male headmaster used their love affair to learn about Mina's lineage. The male headmaster's intentions were actually quite simple. Hela, who was assigned to prosperous Aden, happened to be his niece. Mina went to the underground chamber. After seeing the remorseful Istrid, she solidified her doubts. After confirming the truth, Mina decisively left Istrid. She felt that her life was full of twists and turns. Mina decided to change her appearance, believing that all of this stemmed from her ugly appearance. Her ordinary girl's appearance could also change her destiny. She sought out the Academy's cosmetic magician, requesting a makeover for herself, and she was willing to give everything. However, the magician stated that he wouldn't charge her any money. For any magic, an equivalent price must be paid, and the price for cosmetic changes was her own fertility. But the current Mina had no concern for whether she could bear children or not. Several hours passed. Finally, Mina woke up after the baptism of magic. After arriving at the magic conference, Mina attracted everyone's attention, including the king of Aden. Then, At the invitation of the King of Aden, Mina approached the king, introducing herself. At this moment, the king disregarded her elven heritage, and regarded Mina as a prodigy among the half-bloods. He accepted Mina as his sorceress. Seeing Istrid in the distance, Mina didn't look at him again. A few days later, Mina was assigned to protect the queen. The queen, who had fallen out of favor. Inside the carriage, the queen said to Mina, the King of Aden desired a son, who could inherit his throne, but the queen had given birth to several children, yet she hadn't born a male child. She had quarreled with the king. She chose to take the youngest princess back to her homeland. While the two were chatting, a knife pierced through the carriage roof, nearly injuring the young princess. At the same time, there were screams of soldiers outside. Mina looked outside. Chaos had erupted all around. A figure dressed in a black robe was commanding a black spider, launching an attack on the guards. Seeing the king's royal guards having no resistance at all, Mina realized the situation was troublesome. The royal guards had exceptional combat capabilities. Even against the most formidable assassins, they wouldn't be in such a miserable state. But at this moment, there was no more time for further doubts. She immediately summoned a portal to escort the queen to safety. The group arrived at a desert. The queen was furious at this point. Mina seized a soldier and interrogated him. The guard expressed, a few days ago, they were all prisoners in the underground chamber. Yet, he didn't know why they were suddenly tasked with protecting the queen. Mina confirmed her suspicions. The king wanted to have a little prince, so he decided to dispose of the current queen. All of this must be the king's plan. But just then, the assassin followed closely after opening a portal. The spider quickly killed the remaining guards. Mina took the queen and the princess, and arrived at another mountain. Surprisingly, the queen blamed Mina for incompetence at this moment. Mina summoned a portal and left alone. Watching Mina depart, and the pursuing assassin, the queen started screaming for mercy. She said she could trade the life of the little princess for her own, but the assassin killed the queen. Mina thought, although the queen was despicable, the baby was innocent. After all, she carried the bloodline of the king. Rescuing her might be a chance for her survival. Encountering the assassin again, Mina used magic to restrain the assassin. She picked up the baby and planned to escape through the portal. But the assassin realized Mina's intention. The assassin threw a throwing knife. The knife pierced Mina's shoulder and struck the little princess's body. Mina knelt on the beach, gasping for breath. As she lowered her head to check on the princess, she discovered that the little princess had already lost her life. Mina felt a great sense of guilt for not being able to save the little princess's life. She buried the princess's body. Then she began to recall these days. After arriving in Aden, she had lived a life of luxury and abundance, but she always felt like she had lost a lot, such as her previous kind self. She regretted getting plastic surgery, thus losing the most precious thing for a woman. Unfortunately, time cannot be reversed. A man was wielding his sword, fighting against a monster. The man's name was Geralt, a witcher. In the history of the human continent, witchers were the masterpieces of ancient magic. They were incredibly powerful, but they would lose their human emotions. After undergoing mutation, Geralt, the protagonist, was naturally one of them. This battle took place not long ago, and Geralt was planning to sell the monster's corpse to replenish his wallet. Just as Geralt was dragging the monster's corpse, getting ready to exchange it for a bounty, a group of thugs targeted him. The thugs wanted to teach him a lesson. They approached to help him exchange for the bounty. Geralt didn't trust them. He was aware that these people in front of him wanted to steal the corpse and claim the reward falsely, but Geralt was in a hurry to exchange for money. After all, if the monster's corpse rotted, its value would be greatly reduced, so he decided to leave immediately. But the thugs were unaware of the situation. They relied on their numbers and strength, ready to forcefully snatch the corpse. Geralt no longer remained patient. He quickly took out a few thugs. Just as he was about to continue his journey, the onlookers started hurling insults at Geralt. Some even took out rotten eggs and vegetables to throw at Geralt. It turns out, Witcher were not well regarded by the people. To humans, they were merely monster hunting machines, but if they harmed humans, it was seen as going against divine will and the law. Geralt remained silent, leading his horse away from the scene. At this moment, he couldn't care about so much. He only wanted to go and exchange for the bounty. He had already spent a considerable amount, and had even lost his money pouch recently. Upon receiving the bounty, Geralt realized the money obtained from a monster was not enough for a few days' worth of food, but he had no other choice. Geralt arrived at a tavern. A young musician was playing the organ here. He would approach beautiful women, but in the eyes of the crowd, the young musician was like a clown. They felt that appreciating his performance was less enjoyable than picking up vegetable leaves on the street, because it was simply too unpleasant to listen to. The young musician didn't care about others. His attention had already been caught by Geralt. Using his years of experience, he realized that Geralt was the Witcher he had been searching for. He ignored Geralt's indifference and approached to start a conversation. The musician expressed that his name was Dino. He talked too much. Geralt was annoyed by the noise and was about to leave to continue his monster hunting journey, but Dino mentioned that there was a monster not far outside the town. Geralt immediately stopped in his tracks. Dino led him to a farmhouse. A farmer mentioned that a monster had recently appeared near his residence. He hoped to pay Witcher to help get rid of the menace. Hearing the opportunity to earn money, Geralt immediately agreed to the deal. Dino stated that he didn't want a commission. He wanted Geralt to take him along, so he could document more of Witcher exploits and incorporate them into his ballads. Geralt agreed to the documentation, but declined the songwriting. The two arrived at a valley. Here, Geralt discovered traces of the monster, but just then, the monster that had been observing them for a while attacked Geralt and Dino. Caught off guard, Geralt was thrown against a rock wall. Before he could react, he and Dino were taken to a cave. To their surprise, the monster transformed back into an elf. It turned out he was the leader of the elves in the area. Not long ago, the king sent a large army to exterminate them. As a result, they ended up in this place, watching their people starve to death one by one. He could only steal livestock and food to feed everyone. Geralt felt sympathy for them. Geralt persuaded them to leave this place, because this time it was him, but the next time, it could be the king's extermination forces. Geralt's words made the elves start reflecting on their situation. Dino persuades from the side, and finally convinces the elf leader. The leader agrees to let the two of them leave, and even gives Dino a handmade lute as a gift. Geralt receives payment from the farmers. With money in hand, he immediately indulges in a life of luxury and revelry, but the good times don't last long. One morning, the innkeeper informs Geralt that he has owed a few days of rent. The innkeeper demands that Geralt settle his debt. Geralt turns to a prostitute for information about any available business nearby. The prostitute tells him, just recently, the nearby mine was invaded by a werewolf. The local miners pooled together 3,000 gold coins to hire a Witcher to eliminate the threat. But unexpectedly, the Witcher fled with the bounty, which greatly tarnished the reputation of Witcher. But for Geralt, the 3,000 gold coin reward could sustain his lavish lifestyle for a long time. He immediately sets off alone, but as Geralt arrives at the mining area, he realizes that the miners are angry at his arrival. They brandish their tools and hurl insults at Geralt. Geralt states that he can complete the task first, and then collect his reward, hoping to dispel the miners' suspicions about him. After understanding the situation, Geralt proceeds towards an abandoned castle. On the way, the sorceress Triss stops him. It turns out, she wants to hire Geralt to rescue the werewolf. This confuses Geralt. Apparently, a few years ago, the castle was once a magnificent place, but one day, people started disappearing near the castle. Rumors spread about a monster lurking around the castle. There were even reports that the monster crawled out of the grave, where King's sister Ada was buried gradually. More and more people went missing, but the king seemed to be indifferent. Faced with local protests, the king did not send troops for disaster relief. Having heard about the situation, Geralt became very curious. At that moment, Triss led him to an underground chamber. As soon as Geralt stepped through the door of the chamber, he smelled the stench of blood and corpses. Looking at the pile of bodies that formed a small mountain, Geralt felt that something was amiss. His attention was drawn to a single body placed separately, as it had a silver medallion exclusive to the Witcher, hanging from its chest. The Witcher, according to the miner's rumor, had long died, so it seemed he hadn't fled with the bounty. Immediately after, as Geralt bent down to observe, he noticed something peculiar. There was a noticeable collapse in the chest area of the corpse. He reached his hand into the body, and he discovered that all the organs were missing. Geralt knew very well that this was not the work of a werewolf, but rather that of a creature called a vampire bird. However, at the same time, such a creature wouldn't appear in the world without reason, but rather it must be summoned through the power of a curse. Feeling that something was amiss, the two of them immediately went to the king's castle to seek answers, but the king didn't want to mention this matter. Ignoring the two of them, Geralt stated that this incident was likely related to the king's deceased sister. The king was greatly shocked, and had the guards drive the two of them out of the castle. Geralt and the others arrived at Ada's castle. and saw guards stationed at the castle gates. This further confirmed their previous speculation. After leading the guards away, the two of them entered the castle's interior. The grandeur and luxury were no longer present here. They arrived at Ada's bedroom, and unexpectedly found a letter. In the letter, they learned that the king had an inappropriate relationship with his sister, Ada, but it was discovered by their mother. Seeing the pregnant Ada, and thinking about preserving the reputation of the royal family, their mother had intended to persuade Ada to have an abortion, but the princess died of excessive grief. However, the king's mother had no reason to curse her own daughter. At this moment, Geralt thought of the king's sorceress, Iced. Iced seemed to be hiding something, as he concealed some information from the two of them upon their arrival. Geralt grabbed Iced's collar, and questioned him if he knew something. Under Geralt's pressure, Iced revealed the truth. As it turned out, Iced was aware of the scandal between the king and Ada. However, he had a crush on Princess Ada. One night, as he was preparing to confess his feelings to her, he accidentally discovered the affair between the king and the princess. He cursed Princess Ada and took her life. But an unexpected event occurred. He didn't know that Princess Ada was already pregnant, so his curse continued with the unborn child, turning it into a monster. Iced stated that to lift the curse, the vampire bird must be prevented from returning to its coffin before the third crow of the rooster at dawn. Having learned the cause of the situation, Geralt wasted no time. He carried Iced on his back, and bound him in an abandoned castle. He consumed a potion to enhance his abilities, and waited for the monster to appear. The vampire bird smelled the scent of blood, and crawled out of its coffin. Since killing it would be pointless, Geralt could only buy time. Finally, with Geralt's efforts, dawn arrived, and the vampire bird revealed its true form. Geralt thought the monster was dead, and believed it was time for him to collect his reward. The monster unexpectedly jumped, and bit Geralt's neck. When Geralt woke up, he found himself lying in Triss's house. Triss told him the story. After the monster's death, the king proclaimed that Iced and the monster perished together, holding a grand funeral for Iced. However, Geralt didn't care about this. He was only concerned about his reward. As he looked at the money pouch Triss threw at him, a smile formed on his lips. Little did he know that his friends were already in trouble. Stemming from a royal engagement feast, Cintrian Kingdom was one of the most powerful kingdoms in the north. But later, the Cintrian king unexpectedly passed away due to illness. Since then, neighboring countries and domestic opposition have continuously engaged in warfare. Queen Calanthe of Cintra, facing internal and external troubles, decided to form an alliance with the Skellige Kingdom. She announced to the world that an engagement feast would be held in her palace. Coincidentally, Dino was traveling in the area, and he was invited to perform his musical talent at the feast. When Geralt had no money, no one approached him, but once he had money, Dino could find him. Surprisingly, they met in the bathroom. While they were catching up, Dino hoped that Geralt would accompany him to the engagement feast. It turned out that Dino had previously attracted the attention of many noble princesses and ladies. They will definitely encounter them on this journey, and asking Geralt to accompany him is to have him act as a bodyguard. Geralt couldn't stand Dino's chatter, but he agreed. The next day, the two of them arrived at the palace. To avoid being recognized, Geralt disguised himself as a wealthy merchant from another region, but his disguise was immediately exposed by the sorceress Mousesack. The two of them knew each other from before. Mousesack currently serving as an advisor to the Skellige King. While the two were chatting, Queen Calanthe of Cintra returned from the battlefield, her face still stained with the blood of her enemies. The queen saw Geralt from the crowd and smiled, mentioning Dino's verses that praised Geralt's deeds of slaying elves on the kingdom's borders. Geralt smiled and stated that he was actually captured by the elves at that time, but he managed to convince their leader and set them free. Everyone laughed heartily after hearing this, and Queen Calanthe's impression of him improved. She even invited Geralt and Dino to dine together. In the queen's eyes, a true hero is someone who dares to speak of their failures. From this, we can see that Geralt's reputation, to a large extent, was spread through Dino's ballads. After the banquet began, Queen Calanthe informed Geralt that there might be an unexpected event, and she hoped he would assist. However, Geralt didn't want to cause trouble here, so he refused her. The first proposal came from the prince of the southern kingdom of Nilfgaard, but the queen had never heard of this place, and rejected the prince. The prince left, but Queen Calanthe couldn't have imagined that the southern kingdom of Nilfgaard would eventually conquer the kingdom of Cintra years later. Shortly after the prince left, a knight suddenly burst into the banquet, breaking through the guards' encirclement, and kneeling directly before Queen Calanthe, requesting her to betroth her daughter to him. The queen questioned why the knight dared to enter wearing armor and carrying weapons. The arriving guards knocked off the knight's helmet, and to everyone's surprise, a creature resembling a hedgehog was revealed. The queen asked Geralt to kill the monster, but Geralt recognized that the creature before him was a cursed human, and chose not to follow the queen's request. Calanthe then ordered that the one who slayed the monster would be promoted by 2 ranks, and receive a reward of 500 gold coins. The knight quickly shouted that he had been cursed, leading to his transformation, but the promise of such a generous reward led the soldiers to draw their swords and charge at him. Suddenly, Geralt stood in front of everyone, and Queen Calanthe's insistence on the guards taking action. The commander of the guards joined Geralt's side, because he understood the law of surprise, which has been a rule to maintain order in human society for ages. He knew that going against it could bring great disaster. Seeing the chaotic situation, the queen personally intervened, and the knight finally explained the situation. It turned out that he had been cursed since childhood, and the only way to lift the curse was to meet his true love, and obtain the blessings of their parents. In an accidental incident, he saved the king of Cintra. The knight casually uttered the law of surprise, as a gesture of gratitude. The king, following the ancient law, declared that any unexpected reward he received upon returning home would belong to the knight. However, this choice turned out to be the source of lifelong regret for the knight. It was only upon the king's return to the palace that he learned of the queen's pregnancy, indicating that the unexpected reward was the princess growing inside her womb. The knight originally had no intention of getting involved, but fate led him to fall in love with the princess. Queen Calanthe understood that the princess inherited her mother's powerful magic, while she had nothing, so she often personally led the troops to suppress internal conflicts. At this moment, she had come to realize the immense power of destiny, so she could only bless her daughter and the knight with happiness. In an instant, the knight's curse was lifted, and he regained his original handsome appearance. The queen soothingly touched her chest to express her gratitude towards Geralt. The knight begged Geralt to accept his reward. Seeing the knight's determination to repay him, Geralt casually replied with a passage from the Law of Surprise. But who could have expected that as soon as Geralt finished speaking, the princess of Cintra started vomiting. After examining the situation, the royal medical staff announced that the princess was already pregnant. Geralt finally realized the situation, and after cursing into thin air, he turned around and walked away. He made a vow that he would never set foot on the land of Cintra again. Mousak told him that no matter what Geralt did, it would be futile. Even the sharpest sword couldn't sever the ties of destiny. Geralt's fate had already become intertwined with the unborn child in the princess's womb. If he continued to evade the situation, Cintra would face a tremendous blow. Only now did Geralt start to take it seriously. But how could he continue his witcher's path while carrying a child? On Geralt and Dino's side, the two of them arrived at a lakeside. Dino mocked Geralt as foolish, stating that the light god was just a legend. It turned out that for many years, Geralt had been traveling around, visiting various masters, attempting to find a way to break the curse. Finally, Geralt found a way to remove the curse. According to legends, ancient sorcerers created and sealed light gods, who possessed great power. By finding and releasing these light gods, one could fulfill any 3 wishes. Over the years, Geralt had been searching for these sealed deities. After Dino finished speaking, it seemed like something got caught in Geralt's fishing net. Geralt pulled out a porcelain bottle. Looking at the strange symbol on the bottle lid, Geralt realized that it was the light god he had been searching for all these years. Dino immediately reached out to grab it, and in the struggle, they opened the bottle. In an instant, a gust of wind blew. Dino immediately stated his 2 wishes: countless women and endless wealth. Just as he was considering his 3rd wish, Geralt stopped him, scolding him loudly to shut up. Dino was also angry, and he threw the bottle to the ground. When Geralt bent down to pick up the shards, he noticed a wound on his arm. When the wind stopped, Dino felt an unbearable pain in his throat, making it almost impossible for him to breathe. Geralt took him to seek medical help, and they arrived at a nearby campsite. After examining Dino's condition, an elven doctor explained that the pain in Dino's throat was due to a type of magic, but he didn't know which one. They needed to seek the help of a mage. Then the elf told them that behind the campsite, there was a small town where they could find a sorcerer. On the other side, after seeing the death of the little princess, Mina left Aden. She didn't want to be bound by the Sorcerer's Alliance, and also left the former magic association. At this moment, all she wanted was to break the magic on her body, and find a way to restore her fertility. However, over the years, she had spent all her money, so in this small town, she used her magic to deceive the mayor. and made it her place of residence. In the evening, the sunset illuminated the evening sky with beautiful colors. Geralt and the others finally arrived at the small town where Mina was. Geralt controlled his heartbeat and expressed to Mina his hope for her to cure Dino's illness. Looking at the handsome Geralt, Mina was very interested in the symbol on the light god bottle in Geralt's hand. She agreed to help. Seeing Mina being so cooperative, Geralt had a slight doubt. At night, Geralt went to check on Dino's condition and found a strange symbol painted in Dino's room. Geralt recognized it as the symbol on the seal of the light god bottle cap. He realized that Mina's interest was in the light god, but it was already too late. Mina appeared behind Geralt, and in just a second, she enchanted Geralt with her magic. The next day, Geralt woke up in a prison cell, and the elven doctor from the campsite was also imprisoned with him. Geralt knew that Mina was behind all of this. Just then, a prison guard noticed Geralt waking up, and was about to report to Mina. Geralt cursed the guard for brain explosion, but what he didn't expect was that right after his words, the guard's head exploded, and a second wound appeared on his arm. Geralt suddenly awakened. It turned out the light god was salvaged and released by Geralt. Therefore, the light gods intended to repay no other than Geralt. His first scar was the result of the wish to make Dino shut up, and the guard with the exploding head was the second. Geralt hurriedly went to the mayor's house. He coincidentally encountered Dino, who had escaped. According to Dino's account, it turned out that Mina drew the symbol from the bottle lid on her belly, and forced herself to make a third wish, but no matter what she said, it was of no use. Geralt understood. Mina intended to utilize the light god's characteristics to turn her body into a vessel to contain the light god, in order to gain boundless power, but she misunderstood the fundamental aspect of the situation. The light god acknowledged the imprisoned Geralt. If Mina attempts to forcefully seal the light god like this, there is a high possibility of losing her life. Considering that Mina saved Dino's life, Geralt set aside his previous grievances and rushed towards the bedroom. Seeing Mina about to be consumed by the light god, Geralt was unexpectedly affected by the immense power of the light god. In a daze, Geralt seemed to witness Mina's past hardships. Geralt felt a surprising similarity between Mina's childhood experiences and his own. Summoning his last bit of strength, he made a third wish in his heart. In that moment of reflection, Geralt looked at the third scar on his arm, and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Mina, who was rescued, didn't appreciate Geralt's actions, and instead blamed him for interrupting her plan to seal the light god. They began to argue, but as their argument escalated, both sides felt a surge of passion, and noticed the similarity in their characters. Surprisingly, both of them forgot that they were still quarreling. In that moment, their relationship took a step further. In ancient legends, the dragon named Spear of Destiny claimed countless golden treasures. Dragon eggs are considered miraculous medicine. For thousands of years, countless people have sought to find the traces of dragons. Recently, there have been reports that a dragon's trail has been spotted near the town of Deer's Crossing. For a while, the entire continent was in an uproar. However, dragons are not easy to deal with, and it is difficult for humans, elves, and dwarves to defeat a fully grown dragon. Only the Witcher have the ability to confront them. Therefore, numerous folk groups have formed dragon-slaying teams, and are eager to hire the Witcher to join their ranks. Geralt, in particular, is highly sought after. One day, a peculiar old man named Borch approached Geralt. The old man was accompanied by two black female bodyguards. Borch informed Geralt that recently a green dragon had appeared south of Deer's Crossing in the mountains. The dragon's lair was discovered by a dragon-slaying team, but this only angered the dragon, causing it to breathe fire and burn half the forest. The king issued a reward of 100,000 gold coins. Dino doesn't believe in the existence of dragons. Geralt explains that there are indeed many traces of dragons in the world. Green dragons are relatively common, while red dragons are rarer. Black dragons are extremely scarce, and golden dragons are exceptionally rare. After a conversation, Borch invited Geralt and his companion to join his dragon hunting team, offering a prize of 100,000 gold coins, half of which could be shared with Geralt. But Geralt expressed that he wasn't interested in hunting dragons. In his view, the power of a dragon surpasses that of ordinary monsters. The risks are too great. He didn't want to risk his life for a high bounty. Borch didn't get angry. He even smiled slightly, but he continued to persuade Geralt and his companion to join. During their conversation, Geralt saw Mina entering the tavern, so he immediately agreed to Borch's proposal to join their team. What others didn't know was that Geralt missed Mina dearly. The next day, the group and several other teams set off. While passing through a forest, they encountered a team of dwarves and the Marauder Alliance. Geralt saw Mina and the Aedirnian Knight together in a team. Since the journey began, Dino has been harassing Borch's 2 female bodyguards. Although they ignored Dino, in order to please them, went into the bushes to pick some berries, but he was startled by a sudden appearance of a creature with big eyes. Geralt explained, "It's a herbivorous monster, though it looks a bit scary." The Aedirnian Knight, wanting to impress Mina, drew his sword and swung it at the herbivorous creature. Just as everyone was surprised, the Aedirnian Knight roasted the herbivorous creature's corpse and used it as dinner. Soon, he felt a sudden pain in his stomach. The next day, people discovered Aedirnian Knight was killed on the hillside, without her bodyguard. Mina had no choice but to join Geralt's team. Geralt asked why Mina wanted to join the dragon hunting team. Mina then explained that she wanted to restore her fertility. She heard that a potion made from dragon eggs could solve her problem, so she embarked on the path of dragon hunting. Upon hearing this, Geralt smiled. In his view, the lifestyle of the Witcher and sorcerers was not suitable for raising children, but Mina didn't think so. She believed that having a child meant having a family and a harbor to seek refuge. Her child could inherit her magic. There was only one path up the mountain, with the marauders leading the way. The ancestors of the dwarves had worked in the mining area of this mountain, so they knew a shortcut. As the group couldn't keep up with the marauders' pace, they decided to follow the dwarves' shortcut. However, when they arrived, it turned out to be a boardwalk in a mining area, battered by the wind and the rain. It was in a state of disrepair. There was a risk of falling at any moment. The group could only move forward, relying on the wooden planks and an iron chain beneath their feet. But at that moment, Borch slipped, almost falling into the abyss. Luckily, Geralt grabbed Borch's hand, surprising everyone. Borch wasn't afraid at all. After patting Geralt's hand, he let go of his own hands, watching his master fall. The female bodyguard glanced at Geralt. Geralt understood. They were protecting their master's soul, although it was unclear where they came from. At this moment, Geralt still respected them. Seeing Borch's situation, Dino was a little scared. He persuaded Geralt that they should retreat, but Geralt's mind was already clouded by Mina, and he no longer cared about the difficult journey. The next day, as the group woke up from their sleep, they discovered that the dwarves had left early. They quickly packed up and set off to catch up. Just as they were about to reach the dragon's lair at the mountaintop, casting a paralyzing spell, hindering the dwarves' progress. Shortly after, she and the others entered the dragon's lair first. But what surprised everyone was, inside the lair, there was only a dead green dragon, along with a golden dragon egg. Just as Mina was about to rush forward to seize the dragon egg, she was stopped by the female bodyguard who appeared suddenly. Geralt, who arrived at the scene, was greatly surprised. Just as the group was in a stalemate, a roar of a dragon suddenly came from above the cave entrance. A golden dragon appeared in the sky above the group. The golden dragon transformed back into Borch's form. Then, Borch revealed the reason. The golden dragon was Borch, while the green dragon was his wife. The 2 black bodyguards were 2 black dragon guardians. Since the discovery of the green dragon, they immediately launched an attack. The dragon egg couldn't leave the hatching nest, so the green dragon couldn't fight back, only able to defend, and was eventually killed by humans. The returning golden dragon drove away the humans, thus protecting the dragon egg. Later, after the king issued a reward, the golden dragon transformed into a human form to gather information about the enemies. During the golden dragon's investigation, they discovered that some humans were also kind-hearted. During the conversation among the group, the Marauder Alliance arrived. After learning the truth, Geralt and Mina decisively joined the team protecting the dragon egg, and began to fight the Marauder. The Marauder were quickly eliminated. On Dino's side, he managed to escape unscathed by pretending to be asleep. He is hurrying towards the nest. As he passes by the immobilized dwarf team, he even makes a face at the dwarf leader. But what he didn't expect was, his actions disrupted the magic circle set up by Mina. And so, Dino arrived at the nest with the dwarves, and at this moment, the nest was already calm. Looking at the dwarf leader, Borch waved his hand. He didn't intend to kill these dwarves. On the contrary, he wanted someone to bring the news of the dead dragon to the king. Then he gave the dwarves some dragon teeth, so they could exchange them for a reward from the king. After that, Borch expressed his gratitude to Geralt, and he told Mina that the dragon egg couldn't solve her infertility problem. After learning the truth, Mina felt that all of this was Geralt's responsibility, and she was ready to leave. Borch told Geralt, if he still remembered, the prince who was humiliated by Queen Cintra, who was now the king of Nilfgaard. After years of development, Nilfgaard has become the most powerful entity among the southern kingdoms, and soon, Nilfgaard will undoubtedly launch an expedition against Cintra. Geralt fell into silence. He starts seriously considering his own destiny, realizing that his departure and escapism are what brought the fate of war upon Cintra. At this thought, Geralt feels troubled and restless. He curses Dino, telling Dino to stay away from him, and they part ways once again. Geralt has made up his mind to return to Cintra, as Nilfgaard has already shown its imperial demeanor. Meanwhile, Geralt is on his way to the kingdom of Cintra, where he sees the Nilfgaardian army, with strict military discipline, observing from the hillside where Geralt stands, seemingly endless in number. Their footsteps can be heard from dozens of miles away, and Geralt knows in his heart, they are preparing to attack Cintra. So he finds the sorcerer Mousak, who tells Geralt that his child of destiny is named Ciri. The knight he saved in the past died in a shipwreck along with the princess, and Ciri has been raised by Queen Calanthe. During their conversation, a guard suddenly rushes out. It is an assassin sent by the queen to kill Geralt. At the critical moment, Mousak summons a portal and sends Geralt away from this place. Meanwhile, Calanthe learns that Nilfgaard is coming to attack, yet she still underestimates them. She believes that the king of Nilfgaard is still the same dwarf as before, and at the same time, she has great confidence in her current military strength. She believes her troops are invincible, plus the support of 50 warships from Skellige Kingdom. The queen and her ministers unanimously believe they can easily defeat Nilfgaard. At this moment, Geralt arrives at the palace in Cintra through a portal. He expresses his purpose, hoping to take his child of destiny, Ciri, away, to prevent Ciri from being harmed by Nilfgaard's army. Queen Calanthe's expression suddenly changes. She states that since the death of Ciri's parents, she has raised Ciri on her own, and she has long regarded Ciri as the kingdom's first female heir, and the future of the entire kingdom. She won't hand over the future queen to a witcher like Geralt. Unable to persuade Queen Calanthe, he can only resort to the law of surprise. Under the influence of the law of surprise, the queen seems to agree to his request, but requires Ciri to say goodbye to her relatives and friends. Geralt has no choice but to accept this demand, so he waits on the high platform of the castle. By chance, but seeing Ciri bid farewell to an ordinary person, Geralt suddenly feels wrong, so she immediately goes to find Queen Calanthe. It turns out the queen never intended to let Geralt take away the hope of her kingdom. It is too late for Geralt, who knows all this. An iron cage descends from the sky, trapping Geralt inside. Outside the city of Cintra, Nilfgaard's army finally arrives. Queen Calanthe did not go to the city walls to oversee the battle, but Queen Calanthe did not anticipate that Nilfgaard's army would be several times larger than Cintra's. As they see the endless ranks of Nilfgaardian soldiers, many soldiers of Cintra lose their morale. Cintra begins to retreat step by step, as an arrow strikes the commanding general of Cintra. The outcome of this war is completely revealed. Before long, Nilfgaard's army arrives at the gates of the palace. Mousak casts a protective spell to temporarily shield the queen. Queen Calanthe, heavily injured, is carried back. The queen at this moment no longer possesses the majestic aura of her youth. She finally believes in fate. She is not just an incompetent ruler. She orders the release of Geralt, allowing Geralt to take Ciri and leave. But when Mousak arrives to free Geralt, they discover that Geralt is nowhere to be found. At this moment, Nilfgaard's army breaks through Mousak's spell, breaching the final line of defense. Calanthe becomes extremely desperate, watching the kingdom she built over the years crumble before her eyes. After watching Mousak leave with Ciri, this queen of an era chooses to wield a sword, and leaps off the castle walls. This scene signifies the demise of Cintra, one of the most powerful northern realms. Geralt, who is observing from a distance, witnesses it all, so he immediately storms into the palace, searching for Ciri's whereabouts. At this moment, the guards escorting Ciri are killed by Nilfgaard's general, the Black Knight, and Ciri is captured by the Black Knight. She watches her homeland, engulfed in flames, grow distant. Surprisingly, Ciri suddenly unleashes a tremendous power. In an instant, the earth is torn apart by this power, creating a vast abyss between Ciri and the Black Knight. Ciri doesn't have time to figure out what's happening, so she flees into a distant forest, unaware of how much time has passed. Ciri arrives in a bustling city. She doesn't know where to go or what to do. This place is unfamiliar to her. Aside from Cintra and Nilfgaard, the only place she knows is Skellige. After inquiring with a woman, she learns that it would take a week to walk to Skellige. In the bustling city, Ciri exchanges her last silver ring for a horse, and sets off in the direction of Skellige. By evening, she can only warm herself by a fire. The flickering flames attract several Cintran refugees nearby. Ciri recognizes some of them as familiar faces, and invites them over. But Ciri is unaware of the treacherous nature of humanity. These refugees don't greet the princess. Instead, they capture her, and attempt to hand her over to the Nilfgaardian king, in exchange for a bounty. In her despair, Ciri once again unleashes that power. When she wakes up from unconsciousness, she finds the surroundings leveled to the ground. The woman she met in the city yesterday appears by her side, and takes her back to her own home. The woman explains that she has never had a daughter, and wants to treat Ciri as her own child. But Ciri, though grateful for the woman's life-saving kindness, remembers what Calanthe once told her, about her destiny was Geralt, and she decides to leave. On Mina's side, since parting ways with Geralt at the dragon's lair, she has been seeking a way to restore her fertility. After some twists and turns, she returns to the Magic Academy. Unexpectedly, she arrives just in time for the Sorcerer's Conclave. The sorcerers are discussing their stance on the war between Nilfgaard and Cintra. The alliance is divided into two factions. The female dean believes that Nilfgaard's attack on Cintra is just the beginning. She believes that the Nilfgaardian king wants to conquer the entire continent, and therefore they should form an alliance to counter the aggression of Nilfgaard. While the male dean holds a different view. They believe that Nilfgaard is only targeting Cintra, and won't pose a threat to other countries, and as the Sorcerers' Alliance, they should not interfere. Just as the two sides are debating, a Nilfgaardian sorceress named Hela enters the assembly. Suddenly, the entire assembly falls silent. Hela is the sorceress who was displaced by Mina years ago, and was later assigned to Nilfgaard. Over the years, Hela has helped the Nilfgaardian king establish a new political system, and build an army. Hela assures everyone present that Nilfgaard is only targeting the kingdom of Cintra, and will not launch attacks on other countries. With Hela's statement, the supporters of the male dean cheer and rejoice. The entire Sorcerers' Alliance almost unanimously approves the decision of the male dean, but the female dean refuses to believe Hela's words. She knows well the conspiracies and machinations of Nilfgaard. The uprising of Nilfgaard will undoubtedly overturn the entire geopolitical landscape of the continent. The female dean understands that, although she is almost isolated, and without support at this moment, compromising now would mean allowing themselves to be manipulated. The female dean leads a small group of students and sorcerers, who are willing to follow her, to the elven fortress in the mountains of Soden. This place is a crucial passage for the Nilfgaardian army, and by holding it, they can stop Nilfgaard's plan to advance north. On the way, many refugees voluntarily join the female dean's group. Together, they reinforce the city gates and walls, and create various weapons to counter Nilfgaard. Everyone is working hard to prepare for the upcoming major battle that will decide the fate of the human kingdoms. The main power behind Nilfgaard's ability to conquer the southern continent is the countless Black Knights. These Black Knights created the chaotic energy cannons, at the cost of their own lives, which have immense destructive power, but also backfire on themselves. At this moment, Nilfgaardian sorceress Hela orders an attack. A chaotic energy cannon fires, causing no injuries and deaths on the female dean's side, but it terrifies many people. However, this is only a probing move by Nilfgaard's sorceress Hela. Immediately after, she summons a shining silver magic box, suggesting that she has another plan. The next day, when the female dean and her people wake up, they discover that several sorcerers, along with many soldiers, have escaped overnight, but they didn't have time to count the number of people. Just then, a thick fog began to drift in from the forest. The fog had very low visibility and spread rapidly. Nilfgaard sounded the horn for the attack. The female dean instructed Mina to take command of the army from the lookout station. Shortly after, she led the others to their respective tasks, organizing them to counter the attack. Mina unleashed a teleportation portal, transporting the Wicked Knights to the rear position of the enemy's Black Knights. The Black Knights were the leaders of the entire army, and killing them might throw the enemy into disarray. Yet, Wicked was no match for the Black Knights, and was kicked down the hill after just a few rounds, losing consciousness. In the female dean's camp, the sorcerer Chris cast a plant magic spell. As she slowly chanted the incantation, mushrooms began to sprout throughout the forest. Before long, the mushrooms grew to a certain size, and exploded one after another, releasing a large amount of poisonous gas. The Nilfgaardian soldiers who were charging down the hill were poisoned, resulting in numerous casualties. It looks like a disadvantageous situation. Hela decided to fight back. She summoned a massive teleportation portal. Soldiers just needed to shoot arrows into the portal, and the arrows would be shot out from the other end. Along with a continuous stream of arrows being shot, the Nilfgaardian army broke through the resistance army's western camp gate. A wind mage delivered the silver box that Hela had summoned earlier to the camp. Upon seeing this, Hela immediately recited an incantation. The small square box slowly opened. Countless puppet worms crawled out of it. Many soldiers were controlled by the puppet worms. They turned their attacks against their own comrades. The sorcerer Sadina was also controlled, and attacked Mina. Two sorcerers engaged in close combat. Just then, a boy who was about to use a bomb was controlled. His eyes suddenly became hollow. He released the ignited bomb. The explosive landed in a pile of explosives. After a loud explosion, the resistance army suffered heavy casualties within their camp. The female dean found Hela, hoping the other side would withdraw their troops, but Hela drugged and incapacitated the dean. The resistance army had lost hope of turning the tide. Chris summoned vines to seal off the camp's gates, but it was already a case of too late. He was soon knocked unconscious by incoming soldiers. Meanwhile, the wicked knight sent for an assassination mission gradually regained consciousness. He looked at the soldier reaching out for help on the ground. He chose not to help and instead, he killed him with a single blow. The dean made a great effort. She found Mina, who was commanding at the watchtower, encouraging her to boldly use chaos energy. Reflecting on her own life, Mina finally erupted. In an instant, flames soared into the sky. The Nilfgaardian soldiers hastily fled for their lives, their bodies scattered all over the mountains and fields. Just then, northern countries' reinforcements arrived to finish the battlefield. Although the sorcerers won the victory, they also paid a price. The female dean was using soul vision. She wanted to see the last sight Mina saw before her death, but all that was seen was an empty void. Triggering such a massive chaotic power, being consumed by the energy is probably inevitable. After Geralt escaped from Cintra Palace, he has been searching for Ciri. At this moment, he happened to pass by a refugee camp. A farmer was carrying corpses. Geralt was ready to have a chat with him. It turns out, the farmer's farm was nearby. He was worried the corpses would cause an epidemic, so he came to burn them. However, after learning that these corpses had been there for over 5 days, Geralt instructed the farmer to leave quickly, because after 3 days of death, it would attract ghouls. Before he finished speaking, a pair of big hands emerged from the ground, grabbing the farmer's feet. Geralt drew his sword to help him escape. Just then, more ghouls started crawling out of the ground. These ghouls had highly toxic mouths. Getting bitten by them was nearly fatal, but relying on his combat experience, Geralt remained calm. He quickly dealt with the group of ghouls. Just as he was about to catch his breath, he suddenly felt dizzy. He lowered his head and looked. Turns out there was a bite mark on his leg, and the area around the bite had turned black. Fortunately, the farmer whom Geralt had saved earlier put Geralt onto his own cart and applied herbs to his wound. The intense neurotoxin from the ghoul started affecting his brain. In Geralt's unconscious state, he saw his mother, Vicenna. He questioned his mother. "Why did you abandon me?" It turned out that many years ago, Geralt was abandoned by his mother and given to Calanthe. It was Calanthe who raised Geralt and trained Geralt to become a witcher. But his mother did not answer him. Geralt asked if he was already dead, but his mother told him that she had healed his injuries, and he still had unfinished business. Now was not the time to rest. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned and walked into the darkness. Geralt immediately woke up from the dream. He asked the farmer if he saw the woman he just encountered, but the farmer said that he had been asleep here for 2 days and 2 nights, and besides the farmer's wife, there were no unfamiliar women. Standing up, Geralt moved his arms. He felt as if nothing had happened. He prepared to head to Soden Hill, because his mother told him in the dream that the unexpected child Ciri was heading there. While packing his belongings, Geralt heard the farmer's wife talking about a girl, and based on the description, he felt it was Ciri. Geralt bid farewell to the farmer's family. Perhaps it was fate that connected them. Not long after, Geralt saw Ciri. Although they hadn't seen each other in over a decade, both of them could feel the bond. Then, they arrived together at the Elven fortress in Soden Hill. Upon learning that Mina might have been consumed by chaotic energy, Geralt shed tears, simultaneously gaining and losing the two most important people to him. This day was an immense rise and fall for him. Thus, the first part of the Witcher series came to an end. The TV series The Witcher, released in 2019, as an epic historical fantasy series. If you don't know The Witcher's grand worldview, you may not be familiar with the historical background and characters in the play. In fact, The Witcher is an adaptation of the novel The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. As a major film and television production, director Alex Sakharov and the production team show their incredible adaptation and storytelling skills, delivering a splendid and outstanding work. For fans of the original novel and the Witcher game series, the excellent narrative continuity and music production made the first part of The Witcher one of the most iconic TV series for many people. At the same time, it laid the groundwork for the second part of the series, with unresolved questions about Mina's fate and the enigmatic identity of the Winged Knight. Is all of this a setup for a greater conspiracy? Although it must be acknowledged that many fans still have debates about the status of this film, the visual effects may not be outstanding, and the action choreography may be lacking. Yet, for a work like The Witcher, which has an original novel and a video game adaptation, we cannot deny its excellence and success.